Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Wellington Bisong. It's a real pleasure for me to stay on board this morning with all of you in the course of this webinar, this closing webinar that marks officially the training we have been following up for the past 2 weeks. This morning, we are going to look at two key activities which have to do with the course we have been taking so far. So I will move straight to the point to present to you the agenda we have for the day. We have two presentations. The very first presentation is treatment, food and mouth disease sampling, treatment and biosecurity. And this presentation will be done by Kees van Manen. We'll also have another presentation on FMD risk assessment plan, which I'll present. And we are also going to look at how to complete this course and how to remain connected to the food and the EU FMD network. We are also going to have possibilities to take questions, comments, and obtain responses to them. We'll go straight away now to start with the very first part of the course, which is a presentation on food and mouth disease sampling, treatment and biosecurity by Kees van Manen. Over to you, Kees.
Good morning, everybody. I was a bit struggling with the technology, but I hope you can hear me. I'm going to talk a little bit about sampling, treatment, and biosecurity, only as a sort of summary, because we don't have so much time, of course. When we talk about FMD, and especially about understanding FMD, it's not only about diagnostics. Lab diagnosis is only one part of the story. We also need to do, it starts always a good clinical examination and also with an FMD investigation. And that all together with the results that we may obtain from the lab will help us understand FMD better. So why should we investigate outbreaks? Well, of course, we need to confirm outbreaks. Only rumors, that doesn't help very much. And there are, depending on the area where you live, there are several differential diagnoses. So you must confirm the outbreak by taking appropriate samples. And then, of course, when you're there, you also need to get an impression of the timeline. So what you can do in terms of backward tracing and the source of infection, which may still be ongoing, and also forward tracing, how the disease may have spread to other farms. And you have to communicate about the disease at that time to the farmer. And in a later stage, often during a follow-up visit, we can do what we call an advanced outbreak investigation, where we can learn more about the infection and the disease, where we can evaluate the control strategies, for example, the vaccine effectiveness or the lack of vaccine effectiveness, and the socio-economic impact of the disease on that particular farm or EPI unit, and we can inform future control policies with all these this sort of information. So at the disease area, you always should start to collect samples first from healthy animals, followed by infected animals. So for the healthy, that mainly comes down to taking blood samples. And when it's an older outbreak, you can take serum samples because you will be most interested in serology. And when it is a dangerous contact and it's maybe incubating disease in a very early stage but not showing clinical signs yet, you may decide to use clotted and unclotted blood samples and also look into viremia. Then we go for the affected animals, always look at them from a distance, give them a proper inspection before you touch them, then do a full clinical examination, age the lesions, I will talk a little bit about that, and collect your samples. These samples should be packed in a safe way, in a triple packed system, and should be kept at cool temperatures unless otherwise instructed. And what we really cannot discuss too much now is new sampling procedures, but they're very interesting, like the use of LFD tests or FDA cards. And of course, you should advise your livestock owners on the appropriate care of livestock affected by foot and mouth disease. So when we talk about lesion aging, I have a number of diagrams, and these are not anatomically accurate, but they will help you to understand this in a simple way. How the lesions evolve, and what we call day one is when we see intact vesicles where the epithelium often is blanching, followed by the formation of a fluid-filled vesicle. And when we go into the day two, we talk about ruptured vesicles, in fact, that are freshly ruptured, so they will have a raw red appearance. It's really like a wound. A clear edge to the lesion, no deposition of fibrin, that takes a little bit more time. And these fragments, they may stay for some time, but they can also be easily chewed away by the animal. So one day later already, day three, you will see that many of these margins of the loose flaps of epithelium are not available anymore. So that makes it already difficult to take a nice sample, like an epithelial sample. And so the lesions start to lose their sharp demarcation. There is a bright red. They will lose the bright red aspect because the deposition of fibrin starts to occur, as you can see here, which is yellow in itself. And don't mix fibrin up with epithelium, because in fibrin is not a good sample for the lab. It has a different aspect. It is much less friable, it's elastic, and it's yellow. So day four, you will have a lot of fibrin usually. Considerable fibrin deposition, regrowth of epithelium already here, as shown here in the edges of the lesion. So also no sharp margins anymore. But most characteristic is the amount of fibrin. And day 7, you will have lost most of your fibrin because there will be extensive scar tissue formation. As you can see here, there is more reepithelialization. The lesion is filled up, in fact. And there will be fibrous tissue formation. But often there is still some fibrin visible, some yellow material. Yeah. Sorry. And in day 10, well, we have already a completely healed lesion. And sometimes these lesions, sometimes you can see very nice scars. Also old lesions that are really manifest after a month or more. But I've also seen situations where the lesions had healed perfectly, and a month after the outbreak you could hardly see anything, although the farmer said that these animals had been very sick about a month ago. So this is, for example, just a picture of a lesion. There you can see that this cow has a lesion that looks very typical of acute FMD. This is a freshly ruptured lesion. The underlying dermis has a raw appearance, and there are still extensive tags of epithelium, which get worn off quickly from lesions in the mouth. There could be just the first traces of fibrin, but the estimated lesion of the age, the estimated age of this lesion is like 2 to 3 days. And we will come back to the samples you have to collect a little bit later. So when I look into this picture, and I hope I can use my arrow, yes, sure. You see here an uninfected animal, you have an FMD virus infected animal, and you have a recovered animal. Well, when we concentrate on the FMD virus infected animal, you can take all sorts of samples, like lesion samples from the lesions, and so flaps of epithelium or lesion swabs. You can take saliva swabs or nasal swabs, you can take probing samples, you can take clotted blood samples, and for virological diagnosis in the acute phase, because antibodies will take time to develop, so in the early lesions you will not find antibodies yet. So you can either do virus isolation. Many labs cannot do that. It's also, you need a proper biocontainment for that. And it takes time, of course, at least 1 to 4 days. And often when you have to do a couple of passages, it takes longer. So what is more practiced in many labs is the lateral flow devices, which can be done even in the field. And ELISAs, antigen detection ELISAs, which are often antigen detection serotyping ELISAs, so that you also know the serotype. For the LFDs, they are mainly pan FMD tests. There are some developments with type-specific LFDs. And then, of course, nowadays PCR is very popular. Conventional PCR or real-time PCR can be done within a day. I would say even within half a day. And when you look into the recovered or the vaccinated animals, well, you can take probing samples if you want to know if they are FMD carriers, and also want to know what sort of viruses they carry. And you can take clotted blood samples, mainly for detection of antiviral antibodies. And that can be done either by ELISA. Several types of ELISAs they will take a couple of hours up to 18 hours when there is an overnight incubation step, or virus neutralization tests. That is again for more specialized laboratories that also have the proper biocontainment level. Okay, I hope that gives you a bit of an overview. And what is also important, of course, is to realize the diagnostic windows. We have a preclinical phase where the virus can be detected already in the milk and in the blood, and sometimes also in the throat. So that could be interesting for dangerous contacts in a free situation, for example, when you have an FMD infected farm and you want to know if the neighbors are already incubating for a mouse or not, even before they have lesions, or maybe they have only a fever, they are developing a fever but don't show lesions yet. You may very well detect with PCR the virus in milk and in serum. So no need to take uncoagulated blood there. Most of the virus is in the serum, so a serum tube will do. Clinical lesions, we discussed that already a little bit. And the best samples will be between, let's say, day 1 and day 4. You will have the best samples because we love to have epithelial samples or vesicular fluid. Those are the best ones. And then we have the antibody response that will take a little bit longer. But already from cows with lesions of 5, 6, 7 days old, they may already develop SP antibodies a little bit later, NSP antibodies. So, well, that's what I just said, in fact. Well, I'll just go through this very quickly. We have vesicular epithelium or fluid. You should collect that in PBS glycerol or an appropriate transport medium with a good pH of higher than 7.4 usually, or in a plain tube when you talk about vesicular fluid, or you can collect it on an LFD or a filter paper, and you can test that with different sort of tests. I just discussed that briefly. Blood, you can do clotted blood for serum, and that is useful for virus isolation, for RT-PCR, and for serology. Nasal or oral swabs you can use for acute lesions, and you can take probing samples also in an appropriate buffer for RT-PCR and virus isolation in convalescent cases. So when you would look at the lesion that we just discussed, you will see that the diagnostic samples, the flaps of epithelium, they look sufficiently large to be the diagnostic specimen of choice for virus detection. You can also take anticoagulated and clotted blood samples, but I would say clotted blood samples is good enough for virus and antibody detection. But in this animal, you will not find antibodies yet. You may find virus in the blood. Okay, and this is a very nice diagram. I did not develop that myself. One of the colleagues in EUFMD did it, where we have, like in a sort of cartoon, we have all the information combined, if the animal is showing sick or not, when it does have a fever, when it starts salivating, when it starts becoming lame, what sort of lesions you could expect on the different days. To do some lesion aging, also very important for the epidemiology, of course, for the backward tracing and the forward tracing. And when there is virus to be expected to be present in low or in higher concentrations, and what sort of samples to collect, and when you can expect the development of antibodies, and what sort of samples to take. So this is even like a cartoon you could use as a leaflet in the field when you would laminate it so that it is protected against rain and dirt and so on. So if there is any, well, Wellington, I'm not sure if there's maybe best if we save the questions for the end, and that I continue now because we have to keep in time. I don't see a question coming up yet, so you may think about it and we can do that later. But I have some questions for you. The first is, have you sent samples to the laboratory for FMD diagnosis in the past? The second question is, did you receive a positive diagnosis on the samples you sent, which is encouraging, of course. And do you have access to a lab that can do real-time PCR or conventional PCR? Let's say a lab that can do PCR. So I think we have a poll here. I hope the poll can come up so that we can use, so that you can show your vote. Yeah, it's just maybe a little bit larger, yeah. Okay, so please vote as rapid as you can, because that saves time, of course, just to give us an impression. Yeah, I think this gives a good impression that about 75% of you have not sent samples to the lab, which may imply that you have not been involved in outbreak investigation, or that you did not know what sort of samples and how to send it. I hope after the course you are more capable, or at least equipped to collect samples. And the second question is, well, for those of you that have sent samples, did you receive a positive diagnosis on the samples you have sent? And I know, of course, that in your region of the world there is still some lack of surveillance and laboratory capacity. So this is not surprising, of course, but most of you, those that did send in samples, most of you did not receive a positive diagnosis. So that can be that it was another disease. It can be that there is a limited testing options in the lab. And do you have access to a lab that can do PCR? I see that that several of you have voted now. Maybe some more of you can vote for the last, or give your opinion for the last one. Do you have access to a lab that can do PCR? Apparently nowadays like 65% of you, or even more, have access to a lab that can do PCR, and that's good. I think PCR is really very helpful and has revolutionized diagnostics of infectious diseases very much. Okay, thank you very much, Chiara. We can go to the next one. We can close the poll. And then I will go to the next slide. I have a few more questions. Do you have experience of using an antigen detection lateral flow device, so a PenSite test for field diagnosis? And do you have experience of using filter papers, which are also often called FDA cards, for FMD sampling and diagnosis? I see that most of you do not have experience of using these LFD tests in the field, and that is not surprising, because in many countries these LFD tests have not really been used. They're not cheap, I should say, so often they're used in projects, for example, but they are very useful as a carrier of the virus, and even at room temperature, and you can inactivate them very easily for safe transport. So I think you and I and everybody working on foot and mouth will hear more about LFDs in the near future, especially as a way for easy and safe sample collection. And the same apparently for FDA cards. Well, they have not been used extensively. I know they have been used in India. They have been used quite a lot for avian flu, for example, for other poultry diseases, but not so much for FMD yet. Okay, thank you very much. We will go to the next one. Well, a few slides on on treatment of FMD. FMD is a viral disease, so you cannot give it a primary treatment with antibiotics. We will not discuss virostatics right now. There are some options there, but these are very expensive and they are not registered already, not available commercially. So the main thing is symptomatic treatment, and that's very important. Treating pyrexia, inaptitude, and dehydration. Animals in the acute stage of FMD are reluctant to eat and drink due to the high fever and to the painful mouth. And so you should give them NSAIDs to reduce the fever and the pain, and to improve also the appetite. Give oral or, if needed, even intravenous fluid therapy. Encourage the eating with soft, appetizing food. And avoid applying corrosive or rough substances to the mouth. I know in all sorts of countries and traditions there are all sorts of medicines that are applied in the mouth, but some of them may have a rationale, but many of them will be caustic and will even induce more pain and more necrosis and will not be very helpful. So again, feeding animals affected by FMD, you have to bring the food to the animal, the fodder, because they are reluctant to move, of course. Encourage them to eat, offer soft, high energy, appetizing food, ensure free access to food at all times, and avoid dehydration. Or also very important, ensure free access to water at all times close to the animal, and if needed, give fluids by drenching, by a stomach tube, or even intravenously. Treating foot lesions, also very important, because secondary infections, they will most of the time not happen in the mouth, and they will happen in the feet. And feet must be kept clean and dry, and steps should be taken to keep flies away from the FMD wounds. So house the animal on a clean, dry ground. Clean the feet if they become dirty, with feces and so on. The topical application of an antiseptic or a fly repellent may be very useful, like a spray. Use an appropriate antibiotic only if secondary infections occurs, and avoid the prophylactic use of antibiotics. It is not needed and it doesn't make sense. Mastitis, avoid mastitis also, because they can be very painful on the teeth, and they can have vesicles on the teeth and even on the orifice and the opening of the teeth. So avoid mastitis by a good milking hygiene and prompt treatment if mastitis occurs. Few words on antibiotics. If we base the estimates of FMD on about 250 million FMD cases per year, and 10% of these would be treated with antibiotics, antimicrobials like tetracyclines, that would imply already that there would be a use of 300 tons of oxytetracycline for the treatment of foot and mouth disease alone, which is greater than the total use of antibiotics, antimicrobials by 15 EU countries per year. Of course, there is a great uncertainty in the numbers of cases and the antimicrobial use, and these figures are simply illustrative, just to give you a feel on that you should be prudent with antibiotics and FMD. FMD is a virus again. Antibiotics are not effective primarily. They are, however, useful to treat secondary infections, and inappropriate and overuse of antibiotics can, of course, lead to antimicrobial resistance, but is also an unnecessary cost and an economic burden for the livestock owners. So the best thing to do is prevent FMD cases. Preventing FMD will reduce the usage of antimicrobials. A few slides on biosecurity, and then my turn is over, and Willington will take over. FMD is very, very, very contagious. And there is a very real threat of spread by people going farm to farm. This is not only like a fairy tale, this is what is happening. And that can be through veterinarians, that can be through AI technicians, through vaccination teams, paravets, livestock owners, traders, etc. So it is very important to lead by examples. If vets do not observe biosecurity properly, it will be very difficult to persuade other people. So there are three main principles in biosecurity. And the first one is segregation, to prevent contamination. The second one is cleaning, to remove the contamination. And the third one is disinfection, to kill any remaining virus. So I have two questions for you. The first one is, which of these three do you think is most effective? And the second question is, which of these three is most commonly used? See that we have like 32 participants today, so I'll wait a little bit longer, but I think the message is, at least for the upper one, is very clear, that all of you think that segregation is the most effective measure, and I'm really very happy to see this, because it means that you have very well understood the modules on biosecurity, and this is indeed true. It all starts with segregation. And what is often used, I also agree with that one. In practice, most commonly, disinfection is used. Thank you, Chiara. We can close the polls. And I will go to the next slide. So segregation is indeed the most important and effective step. It is the strongest form of biosecurity and where effort should be placed if at all possible. So that can be physical. And so you change your clothes, you change your equipment, or you clean it properly when you have to, when it's not a disposable. There can be a fence or a barrier, or that you can have segregation in time, that you have leave time between visits so that you quarantine yourself before you go to a next farm after having visited an FMD suspected farm. Cleaning is the next most effective step. If all the dirt is removed, there is little left for the virus to be carried by. And disinfection is important, but it's the least reliable step of biosecurity. Its effectiveness depends on many factors, in particular the quality of the cleaning process. That's what we often see, that there is like a foot bath, or there is even a wheel bath, which is never replenished, refreshed, and there is some disinfectant in there with lots of organic material, and then most of the disinfectants, if not all, they will not work anymore. So biosecurity, raise awareness of FMD in general, as well as specific time and place of outbreaks. Also good for farmers to know that there are outbreaks nearby, and also inform them about biosecurity, what they can do themselves to keep the infection out. And especially this biosecurity, I would like to emphasize, it's not only important for vets, it's important for all people around and on the farm. So like AI technicians and farmers. Limit your farm visits when you know that there is an FMD outbreaks in the area, especially after you have visited known or suspect infected farms. Use personal protective equipment and change your clothes between farms, at least boots and an overcoat, or like something like an apron. It doesn't have to be double Tyvek suits all the time. Sometimes that's not practical or not possible, but then even then you can take measures using gloves, using boots, using overshoes, using overcoats, high pressure hand sprayers, whatever to clean your hands and feet. Okay. So as take-home messages, I repeat it again because we consider it very important. Strict segregation between dirty and clean areas is essential. Disinfection is not enough. You must clean first. Clean your boots and your hands and nails thoroughly, and especially when you use gloves. Of course, that's one of the reasons to use gloves, so that you don't get dirt under your nails. So take your time, it's worth it. Use PPE if possible. Take only what is needed onto the farm, and be restricted and not take all sorts of things on the farm that you will have to clean and disinfect again to take it off the farm. Lead by examples, because then you can expect that others may follow. So that was a lot of words from my side again. I hope you have enjoyed the course, and I give the floor back to Wellington now. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Keith, for the presentation. I don't know if there are some questions related to Keith's presentation, general questions. You can now present them. Okay. I just say thanks, Keith, and I don't find any real question coming up. Okay, someone asked what is the meaning of PPE. I will allow. I don't know if Keith is still there. If Keith is not there, if his Keith is there, he can respond to this.
I can respond to that. Just struggling to get my camera again. But anyway, that's not so important. I hope you can hear me. But PPE, that is personal protective equipment, and it's sometimes there's some confusion, because when we talk about zoonotic diseases like avian influenza, it also includes that it is protecting you as a person, as a worker, so that you also should wear, for example, a mask, and take all the measures that will help you to prevent being infected with avian influenza H5N1, for example. But for the mouth disease, that is not the reason to use PPE, because it's not a zoonosis. But the main reason is, of course, not to spread the virus. So it is to protect the other farms, the environment, etc. So therefore, I would say wearing a mask. We never wear a mask when we do outbreak investigations for the mouse disease, for example. But we take all the other measures to keep ourselves clean and not carry the virus from one farm to another. The quickest method for diagnosis in the field would be the use of a lateral flow device. It's in fact the only test you can.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you have time to take more questions.
See if I can get my camera back.
There's another question here. What is the quickest method of diagnosis in the field?
No, for whatever reason, I don't have my camera, but that is not important. You know my face now. I think the most. Can you repeat the question? What was it again, Wellington? Yeah, well, in fact, the only way to make the diagnosis in the field, apart from good clinical observation, of course, is the lateral flow device, because that you even have them also for NSP antibodies.
Yeah, he asked the quickest method to carry out a diagnosis in the field.
The PEN FMD, for confirmation that it is indeed FMD, you can use these lateral flow devices, and you can do them on the spot, and you will have, if you have good quality epithelium, you will have within 10 minutes, you will have a diagnosis.
Okay. We can take questions. You can send your questions. You know that the e-learning
Yeah,
site
sure,
is
sure. I
still
think I
open.
have to
Even the
leave a little
WhatsApp
bit
group will
earlier,
still
so
be
maybe
open
best if
right
I take the
up to
sample of
Friday.
the questions now.
You can send
And
some of the questions. Like here, I see someone is trying to ask
I'm just
that we should
saying
shed some
maybe you
light
can
on how the
help me a bit,
what the
Wellington, with what
probank is.
questions to
I don't know,
answer
Keith,
right
if you
now.
have a few more minutes, you can shed some light on this for these participants.
Yeah, yeah. The probank, that's an interesting one, because with the probank you will detect the virus in the throat of an animal, and many of
Yeah.
the animals, either
Now, if you
if
can
they are
answer the
vaccinated or non-vaccinated,
a participant
they
asked
maybe 50% of the
if you could
animals will
shed
become
some light
carriers
on the
for a
use of the
longer time or
probank.
a shorter time. And we define carriers, in fact, as animals that still have the virus detectable in the throat 28 days or longer after infection. Probing samples have been used quite a lot to study the epidemiology and the relevance of African buffalo, for example, in many of the wild national parks. So that's an application. Also, when you have an older outbreak, which may well be the situation in your um, in your area, that you don't have acute notifications, or you have to deal with remote areas, and all you can find are old lesions of 2 weeks old, for example. You could take the probing sample, but then of course you need a laboratory that can do either at least PCR and maybe also virus isolation. And you should realize that it does not necessarily reflect the recent situation, because it can be that you have a positive result from that animal because he was already a carrier, maybe already during a year or so or longer. So especially in highly endemic situations where multiple serotypes and strains are circulating, it's always difficult to interpret the results of such probank samples. And the same accounts, I must say, for serology, because also NSP antibodies, they can persist for years. When you take blood samples from older animals or adult animals, and they are positive for NSP antibodies, that may reflect a recent situation, but may also reflect an infection of a year ago.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I said, the e-learning site is still active. The WhatsApp group, it will still be active until Friday. We take just this last question from David,
Yeah.
who is asking, based on the animal husbandry system in Africa, what is the best biosecurity measure? What's the best biosecurity measure that would be recommended, considering that animals are always on the move? Keys, maybe perhaps I give you a hand there, and give you a hand with this response. Uh, Keith just presented to you by biosecurity and mentioned the three important principles. You know, segregation, like you all mentioned, is very, very important in a context where animals are always on the move, as you think. But segregation is the most important thing. And when we talk of segregation, we talk of quarantine measures, we talk of fences that farms make. Farming systems have to move. I think throughout the course, we notice that people keep thinking that animals move from one area to the other. I don't think that is the only farming system in Africa. I see in many parts of Africa a great change. The farming systems are changing. A lot of farmers are trying to get a little bit semi-intensive and trying to improve on the way animal husbandry is done, and they are paying a lot of respect to the environment at this time. So, if you look at foot and mouth disease, is not only limited to cattle where people go extensively. There are some pig farms, well-organized pig farms. So you can think of biosecurity in that context, and all the three components of biosecurity: segregation, cleaning, and disinfection in such circumstances. where animals move in large areas from village to village in search of pastures, in search of water and other things, communities can mobilize themselves to, if they have information on outbreaks, they can know when to say, oh, animals cannot move from this area to this area because there's an outbreak in another area. Just that alone is a biosecurity measure. If there are stop orders preventing animals from movements,
Yeah, well,
quarantines,
just a few words
asking
and then a
animals
last
not to
question,
move
and then I
when they
will
have
stop
information that there's an outbreak in a particular
with the
area.
questions at least.
It's a
I
method
think
of
that was
segregation. So I think
very correct,
segregation is
good
a
answer
tool
that
that
you
has its
just,
place
piece of
in your
information that you
context.
just supplied,
Keith,
Wellington.
Keith, I don't know if you
I realize that when
if you
animals
want
are
to
on
say
the move
something on
and
this.
when they have common grazing and common watering, biosecurity is almost impossible. But when you are more residential, or even I've seen that even in highly endemic areas like in Kenya, that some households which use their own which bring in fodder or which use piped water instead of going to the river or whatever, that they can keep free from FMD even within a highly endemic situation. But when you are really talking about pastoralists that are moving all the time, then of course it's difficult. So then one of the things to consider is, of course, to vaccinate the animals before they move. But then you talk about prevention, and that's a different story. And then one last question: is there a correlation between NSP antibody titer and time of infection? Actually, there is not. In fact, in the NSP antibody tests, we do not titrate sera, so there is not really a titer. They're either positive or negative. And once they will take, after infection, they will take some time, at least let's say 8 to 10 days, to become NSP antibody positive. But after a full infection, they can then stay positive for years. Up to more than 3 years has been demonstrated. So that is what I meant when I talked about serosurveys in endemic areas. You have to concentrate if you want to know, to get information about the recent history of FMD, the recent incidence of FMD. You have to concentrate yourself on sampling young animals that have lost their maternal antibodies. So let's say between 6 and 12 months of age. So Wellington, over to you.
Yeah, I want to thank you very much. I think it's we'll take the rest of the questions. Now we look at the next presentation, which is on risk assessment plan. I am going to make this presentation myself. Just a minute. Now, in the course of your in the last module, you had the occasion to look at the progressive control pathway. Summarily, the progressive control pathway is a tool which is used by the FAO, OIE, and all countries that are engaged in the global control strategy for the control of foot and mouth disease. This approach was designed by EU FMD in 2008 and jointly with FAO OIE, and I've been using this since 2011. So this is about 15 years. It's a global control tool which is used by countries. What is very important here for us to know is to know that the progressive control pathway is a tool that is designed in such a way that members of countries that are interested in making progress in the control of foot and mouth disease and to derive the benefits that go with it can exploit it and easily in an adaptable manner reduce the risk of foot and mouth disease in their context. The foot and mouth disease, the PCP has key principles which you should be aware now. First of all, you know that the PCP is made up of 7 clear stages, stage 0 right to a large stage, which is an OIE stage, and this an OIE stage. I will just take these stages very quickly to you. The stage 0 is a situation where the country, the foot and mouth disease risk is not well known in the country. They don't have enough information that is reliable concerning the disease. But however, the disease has an impact in the community, but they don't have reliable information as to how to control the disease. That is stage 0. Stage 1 is a disease where risk and control options are identified. The country in this stage, they have identified the risk and different control options that are possible. In stage 2, the impact of FMD is reduced through targeted sectors and areas by virtue of the fact that they had elaborated a good control measure in stage 1, and they have activities that they are doing. In stage 3 is a situation where the virus circulation is reduced where the national official control program is applied. So the country, for instance, elaborates a program that actually helps to reduce the risk of foot and mouth disease. And then stage 4 is a stage whereby the OIE officially recognizes the national FMD control program of a country. And there is a stage, which is an OIE stage, where there is FMD circulation with vaccination, and this stage is usually endorsed by OIE. There's a final stage, which is the 7th stage. It's equally an OIE stage, which there's no FMD and there is no vaccination. So we have to retain that there are 7 main stages: stage 0 right up to stage 4, plus 2 additional stages that are OIE stages. What are the key principles of the progressive control pathway? Like you must have seen, the progressive control pathway is actually designed for FMD endemic countries. It is simple to communicate and apply. It is made up of progressive steps. It is non-prescriptive. No country is forced to do what it doesn't want to do. It's done in a collaborative manner, and above all, it is based on risk. It's risk-based. The way it is based on reducing the risk of the virus in that community, and of course, it has objective and is evidence-based, with clearly defined outcomes and with benefits that can be obtained from them. I move to the next step. So why do we write a risk assessment plan? A risk assessment plan is needed for it's a comprehensive plan to study foot and mouth disease, and a risk assessment plan is the most important requirement for countries that want to move from stage 0 to stage 1. So the parameter that has to be put in place is a risk assessment plan. To move from stage 0 to stage 1, you have to elaborate a risk assessment plan. So the risk assessment plan, to move from 0, it has, like I said, it has clear objectives and outcomes. So from stage 0, where foot and mouth disease risk is not controlled and there's no reliable information, the indicated outcome is to move to stage 1. So to move to stage 1, you need to elaborate a risk assessment plan. So a risk assessment plan is the indicator outcome for movement from stage 0 to stage 1. So the risk assessment plan is actually organized it's actually a template. It's a questionnaire. It's in the form of a questionnaire, which a country needs to. It's a questionnaire in the form of a template, which a country desiring to move from stage 0 to stage 1 has to fill with clearly defined activities and outcomes. So this template has 6 columns outlining activities that have to be carried out, And then it's of course you need to know that it's a veterinary service that is the official body that usually develops the risk assessment plans, but in collaboration with all the stakeholders. Like I said, it is for countries that are endemic, that have endemic, that FMD is endemic in their context. Countries where they don't have foot and mouth disease don't do a risk assessment plan. So on the screen here, you will find some countries, a map showing the situation of different countries in West Central Africa. You'll find those in green here. It's some countries that are in stage 1, which means they have elaborated. The other ones, like these ones are in provisional stages, and these ones, they don't have any, they are still on stage 0. So what are the objectives of a risk assessment plan? From a general perspective, it's to align how a country, it's a preparation, it's to align how a country wants to prepare to carry out, to implement activities to move from stage 0 to stage 1. You know, in PCP perspective, the risk assessment plan has indicator outcomes on how it has to do this change from 0 to stage 1. And the finale of a risk assessment plan is the development of, is to set in the groundworks for the development of a risk-based strategic plan. So looking at that template, there are 8 important activities that have to be looked into when you are developing a risk assessment plan. So the template starts with the very first one, which is to do an analysis of the value chain, the value chain analysis and stakeholder identification. So for all the susceptible species of livestock and even wildlife that can be carry the virus, that can be infected with the virus, you have to do a value chain analysis and identify all the stakeholders that are involved, so that you can understand at the different stages where the risk can be involved. The second point is to have a working hypothesis on how FMD virus circulates. The third activity is to do a socioeconomic study of the impact of FMD in the area. The fourth activity is to do an identification of the FMD virus and its subtypes that are in circulation. The fifth one is to look at the enabling environment. That's the enabling environment. We're talking of the veterinary service. We are talking of actors, farmers association, or all how work is organized, and how the veterinary service can the capacities that they have to they can engage a control measure. And you have, of course, the sixth activity is regional cooperation, because, like you know, foot and mouth disease is a transboundary disease, and it does not recognize borders. So what you have to put in evidence, what level of collaboration you can have with neighboring countries that are in the region. There's a seventh aspect, which is very, very core, is an activity that enables you to identify the risk hotspots for the country. So, because the objective is to be able to reduce the risk of foot and mouth disease in a progressive manner, and to manage resources efficiently. So, if the country is able to identify the risk hotspots, they will be able to know how to attribute resources where the problem has the highest impact. And of course, the eighth aspect of the risk assessment plan is a development of a risk-based strategic plan. This risk-based strategic plan is the last aspect of a risk assessment plan. And of course, you should know that this risk assessment plan is adaptable to all countries where FMD is found. So I go step by step just to explain to you. This is an example how this template is organized. You have column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, and column 6. What is most important is look at what is in column 1. Like in column 1, the outcome of column 1 is value chain analysis and stakeholder identification. What are the activities that have to be done? You have to do stakeholder interviews, workshops to identify stakeholders and develop value chain maps for main production production or husbandry systems. And then you have to do go into consultation with national experts and to actually know the situation along the entire value chain with these stakeholders. Of course, you have columns 4, columns 3, which is a value chain. You enlist all these value chain and the stakeholders. In column 4 is to know the actors who are responsible, what they have to what they have to do, and then column 5 is the time frame for which that activity has to be done, and column 6 is the identified challenges that are inherent in that outcome. In this case, the value chain. So, is there need for external assistance, or is there a need for external assistance and things like that? So, you will always have this issue of knowing who has to do what, when, and what support. So, on the second outcome, which is a working hypothesis on FMD, how the virus circulates in the environment. In this situation, the country is supposed to develop a national case definition for foot and mouth disease. What is FMD? Are the stakeholders aware of this disease? Can they identify foot and mouth disease? Are they able to report cases? Is there a structure through which cases can be reported? They have to try to put all this into place to understand how the virus circulates in the environment. The third activity is a socioeconomic impact assessment of FMD in the situation. In this situation, real studies have to be projected on how they want to understand the direct impact of foot and mouth disease as well as the indirect impact of foot and mouth disease on the livelihoods and the welfare of the population. The fourth activity is identification of FMD risk virus. In this outcome, what is supposed to be done is to ensure there is a good environment for outbreak investigation, to ensure that there's good capacity, the laboratories that are needed are in place, the tools that they need to do this kind of analysis or diagnosis are all in place. The means of communication, the networks, if all of them are able to diagnose this disease and know how it circulates and know which one is prevalent. And you should, of course, know that it's not something that is static. It changes with time because you can have incursions of new serotypes and new strains. The fifth outcome of doing a risk assessment plan is to look at the enabling environment. With respect to enabling environment, we are referring principally to the veterinary service. What is the performance of the veterinary service? What are the structures that are in place for the veterinary service to coordinate activities among stakeholders, public veterinary service, the private veterinary service, all the actors along the value chain, and to know how they can efficiently manage identification of cases, manage prevention of new infections and other things, to find out how this service is structured, how it can possibly carry out activities. And if there are gaps, if there are issues with this system, this risk assessment plan has to outline all the challenges, all the deficits, so that the national veterinary service may be having with respect to trying to reduce the burden of foot and mouth disease in the country. The sixth aspect is the regional cooperation. And like I said, a regional cooperation, foot and mouth disease is a transboundary disease, and regional cooperation is very important. who are the partners that are involved. Usually, they're supposed to have a regional advisory group, which is usually made up of chief veterinary officers of countries in that region, and how they can collaborate and share information. So there should be a high level of regional cooperation, and the risk assessment plan has to put this in evidence, because if there's no transparency between countries, between neighbors, no efficient food and mouth disease control can be put in place. The seventh outcome is to identify the risk hotspots. What are the possible entry points for foot and mouth disease in the country? The airports, the borders, the seaports, the different areas where production is intense. This has to be structured and identified. These risk spots, these high spots that are considered high risk spots, have to be analyzed and prioritized in order of their importance with respect to foot and mouth disease spread. So once this is analyzed, it can help the country in how to manage, because they'll know, okay, we can prioritize which area we need to put a lot of emphasis based on the resources that are available. And of course, the very eighth aspect of risk assessment plan is the risk-based strategic plan. A risk-based strategic plan, it's actually a working document on how you want to mitigate the impact of foot and mouth disease in the country. And with all these 8 aspects in place, you can now try to seek, if you have all information about, or if you analyze everything in this plan in the template, you can now be able to try to seek to move from stage 0 to stage 1. And in this case, the country is not alone. You work with partners. So if you need any technical support to develop the risk assessment plan, if you need, you people are part of the team, of your team that you're working in the various countries. A risk assessment plan, like I said, is a very, very important document that can help the country to move from stage 0 to stage 1. So if you have any reason that you have need for assistance on the development of a risk assessment plan for your country, you can address a mail to eufmd@fao.org, because we have a pool of experts that can be able to give your country a hand. So after a risk assessment plan has been elaborated, what next? Where do you submit it? The country's risk assessment plan will be assessed by the regional advisory group. This regional advisory group, like I said, is made up of CVOs of member countries around where you are in the region. So they have to see it, and then in collaboration with the FAO, OIE, FMD working group, they are going to study what you have proposed. In fact, it is very important for you to highlight, for us to highlight, that it is a country that proposes, that asserts its position. It's not somebody, it's not an organization external to the country that actually says you're in stage 0, or you're in stage 1, or you're in stage 2. It's you yourself who tries to justify that based on these evidences, based on these activities that we are doing to reduce foot and mouth disease. We are in stage 1, and then you're in stage 2, or you're in this stage. So you have to, with all that, you can submit to the regional advisory group, which is made up of members of other countries around you, plus the FAO-OIE working group. They have to study it together with you to assess whether you deserve the stage where you're proposing for yourself. So for this to happen, the risk assessment needs to be submitted to the following email address: FAOFMD@FAO.org, or OIE. You make OIEFMD@OIE.org, and you copy EUFMD@FAO.org. So when to submit a risk assessment plan? Anytime you can. Each country is free to submit its risk assessment plan at any time. But for countries that are on the provisional stage on the PCP, they have a limited time of 6 months to fulfill to actually be placed on the right stage. So after you submit, what next? The FAO OIE working group will assess the risk assessment plan with support of PCP FMD experts and will discuss their findings with the regional advisory group through a teleconference. It is foreseen that countries receive feedback of this process within 2 months and be assessed in the PCB stage 1. So the final take-home message on risk assessment plan, we have to retain that the risk assessment plan is a document produced by veterinary services following a template for a country to move from stage 0 or provisional stage 1 to stage 1. This would concern most of the countries in West and Central African region. The risk assessment plan is a plan that actually outlines activities to be carried out in the form of a document to help control the impact of food and mouth disease in a given country. This approach, this risk assessment plan, this approach is also relevant for other transboundary animal diseases which you should know. Thank you for your kind attention. If there are any questions, we can raise them. I see a few questions here. Someone is asking, how can you do FMD virus identification in a country where both veterinary and diagnostic capacity is very low? I think your question is each veterinary for you to be able to do diagnosis. I've just explained to you what the risk assessment plan is. After the elaboration of a good risk assessment plan, you know, it shows how things have to be coordinated. You will not be doing that as an individual most often. When a structure is put in place, you'll be able to carry out activities in a sustained manner that can give you useful results. If you as an individual, for instance, do a diagnosis of FMD now, it's confirmed, for instance, in a given locality. And if there is no structure for which you have to transmit this information, doesn't make much use. But so if there's a risk assessment plan and it's a framework, which your countries all are already have already taken engagements, like I know different countries in West Central Africa, they have already accepted their stages in their PCP stages. So if they can organize and have a diagnostic framework where the samples where there's sampling for identification of different outbreaks, diagnosing the different outbreaks of foot and mouth disease. This information can be collated, can be sent to laboratory, collated to help them know what measures to take to fight the disease. Someone asks, is it possible to, this from Laosino, is it possible to do a risk assessment plan in a country that is undergoing political instability? Of course, you know, you should be able to know that where there's a veterinary service is not functional, it can be very difficult for you to do that. Oko Emmanuel asks, I need some more understanding of stage 2 and 3 of the PCP. We don't have much time, but like I said, stage 2 is after you move from stage 0 to stage 1. Stage 2, in stage 2, you have a risk-based control strategy which you are implementing. And in stage 2, stage 2 of the PCP, the impact of foot and mouth disease is actually, there are activities ongoing in your country in stage 2, which you are accorded stage 2. It therefore means that you have activities that you have designed based on the risk assessment plan that you have done, and you are executing a risk-based strategic plan, which is what you obtained in stage 1, and you have elaborated a risk-based strategic plan to be in stage 2. And this risk-based strategic plan is a set of activities that you are carrying in a prioritized manner to amply reduce the impact of foot and mouth disease where you are. So in this situation, it is your country alone that is doing that. Now, to move to stage 3. In stage 3, the virus circulation is heavily reduced, and the OIE, you have there's a national official program that is applied. So you move from just merely controlling the virus, the virus, to a stage 3 where there's a well-organized national official control program. And of course, stage 4 is the stage where OIE endorses your national control program. I hope I've answered that question. So, if you have other questions, you can send them on the discussion board. Like I said, we are still available until Friday. So, we'll move now to see how do you stay connected to EUFMD? How do you get more information after this training course? So, how do you stay in contact with EUFMD and follow up further activities? So, EUFMD has the tools as well as trainings. There's a whole bank of knowledge where you can access a lot of useful information from the website where you all have your passwords. There are webinars that can come up from time to time. You can access this information. You can carry out research on the database of information that EUFMD has in stock. There are, of course, open access courses that everyone can log in. There are about 6 modules that are available. For instance, there's a course on why is FMD control challenging. That course can be able to help you answer most of the questions that you are raising now. What is the role of PCP in the global food and mouth disease control strategy? If you read this course that is available free online, you can be able to get more information. What is risk-based FMD control? You can get this information. Is what I have been discussing with you a short while ago. What activities are needed to progress on the PCP pathway? It's the same thing that I've been discussing. How is a country assigned a PCP stage? You can get all these details. What is my role in FMD control? So you can have all this information available at the EU FMD site. At times, if EUFMD can organize open sessions where conferences and seminars where you can take part, either sitting on the spot or moving over to attend them. So there's a wealth of information that you can take advantage. EUFMD also is involved in networking, as you already have your networks, which your country or you yourself as an individual can be part of them to continuously receive information that can help you update the knowledge you have on foot and mouth disease and how to control it. So, if you would you be interested in attending more webinars or topics related to FMD? I don't know if there's a poll on that, but if not, we can write on. If you have information on that, please you can send us. If you think you would like to have more follow-up webinars, you have our contacts. You can send us information. We can always sign you up and give you notifications. Are there others in your country who would benefit from this training? If you think that there are others, please you can share a lot of information with them. The information that we have, share the contacts, share how they can access these open courses, give them the website. This website has a lot of information that people can benefit from. So if you have other ideas on how your organization could collaborate with FAO and EUFMD on FMD related training, please feel free to send us an email to eufmd-training@fao.org. So now I give you a few remarks on how you're going to help you complete this course. Like I said, the course is still available until Friday the 29th at midnight. You need to take a final assessment. Certificates will be awarded to those who complete the 7 training modules, and those who complete the final assessment and gain a satisfactory mark, and at least for those who make at least one contribution in the forum, either on the e-learning site or on the WhatsApp forum. So these are the 3 main conditions that you have to fulfill to be able to have a certificate. Like I said, this course ends on Friday, March 29th at 17 hours CET. So I want to thank you very much. I take 1 or 2 questions before we close this presentation. Any question? General questions? I can't find any question coming up. When is the assessment taking place? The assessment is now available. You just visit the site. there's a link on how you can take the assessment. On the WhatsApp forum, we have equally provided this as a link to do the assessment. You will have to retain that you can do the assessment on your own anytime of the day that you find it convenient for you to take the assessment. How do we access the certificate? The certificate will be sent to you 2 weeks after you complete the assessment. It will be sent to you by email. If you have any further doubts, any further questions, you can send us an email using the usual address that you have. So with this, I want to call this webinar to a close. I want to sincerely thank those who have made contributions in this training. I think of the training team. Our appreciations to members of this training team, Nick Leons, myself, Etienne Chevan, Melissa Maklos, Abdul Nasser, Jenny Mott, Kiara Derry, Alexandra, Nadia Romic, and Keith Van Manen, that you